The moderator of the panel is Anand Raghavan, who is the Chief Product Officer of Armor Blocks and an IIT Madras alum. He was the CEO of Asha for Education, which is an India-based nonprofit with more than 60 plus chapters across the globe. He was also on the board of several nonprofits related to children's education and health, such as Mindful Schools and NVIDIA Foundation. With this, I will hand things over to Anand, who will also introduce the rest of the panelists. Go ahead, Anand.
Thanks, Ishita. Thank you all for being here. I'm sure all of us, given the opportunity we got at the IITs, are all excited about education itself in general and being technologists, what technology can do for education. So it's a very relevant panel, two big passions of mine, and we have an amazing panel with us. So just want to start off with laying out what we want to touch in the very long 35 minutes that we have. We are looking at a few different aspects of education that has fundamentally altered the landscape in the last 10 years or so. I mean, you're going to start talking about access-related issues, discovery-related issues, discovering content, curation, and then move on to kind of talking about mentoring aspects of education, and then close out with innovation and things around that. So I want to start off with giving time for each panelist to kind of talk about their backgrounds. I'd love to start with Anurag first. Anurag was the creator of Google Scholar and done a whole bunch of really interesting things around that. Anurag?
Sure. So Google Scholar is sort of a sabbatical project of mine that grew to cover my entire life. For people who are not familiar about Google Scholar, and it's possible some of the audience may not be, it allows you to find scholarly research, articles, papers, dissertations, what have you. You should be able to find anything, no matter when it has been done, where it has been done, or in what language. You should be able to enter a new field and be able to pick it up, assuming you have the desire and the willingness to go through it.
Geeta?
Hi. By profession, I am an architect, like a software architect at Oracle. I'm also a mom of two wonderful daughters. And I have spent a lot of my life, a lot of my mental bandwidth over the years, just trying to find online courses and online resources for them to enrich their education. Together, between the two of them, they have taken more than 15 online courses through maybe 6 or 7 different vendors. Some of these courses have been in math and science to accelerate their education at school, and then some of them have been to kind of build more foundation in computer science, so that's through their own interest. So today I will be talking from the point of view of a very demanding consumer of online personalized education. I have developed some insights over the years, and I hope you guys find it useful.
Thanks, Geeta. Shantanu?
Sure, and so I got into education about 10 years ago when I helped start Khan Academy. So I knew Sal we were high school math competitors and kind of grew up together. We're roommates at MIT, roommates when we came out here. I spoke at his wedding, he spoke at his wedding, he spoke at my wedding. And so we knew each other for a really long time, and he had this YouTube channel that was getting some traction. And at the time, now for Khan Academy, very small, but at the time it had like 20,000 random strangers subscribing to him. And we thought, okay, there's actually something big here. People are getting a lot of value from these YouTube videos. So about 10 years ago, I shifted from McKinsey & Company, a very different world, and entered the educational nonprofit space to help start that organization. And I did that for about 6 years. 3 years ago, I joined Google. I work in the Google AI group, where we're looking at innovative ways of applying AI for social impact. So one recent project that we launched is called Bolo, which is a speech-based reading tutor that's targeting the global literacy problem. So there's about 500 million kids around the world who really still don't learn how to read. A large percentage of that is actually in India. About 50% of kids in rural India by grade 5 still can't read. So we built an app that takes the best of Google technology, the speech recognition, the text-to-speech, and has a reading tutor to help kids through that learning process. So I've continued to just look for ways that technology can be applied to education over the last decade or so.
Thank you all for being with us today. So we'll start with access and discovery-related issues. So how do people get access to information? How do they discover that? And we'll just go through the panelists and get their opinions on that.
OK, that's at some level you're describing all that I do, which is discovery and access in that order. The challenge today, everybody expects to be able to find everything. The challenge for research papers is most of research papers are for pay and have been restricted access for as long as they have been research papers. You had to subscribe to journals when such journals were available, and now they're online. You have to pay a different fee in some mechanism. The first challenge is to let it be, and second, every field had its own spaces. You could go to PubMed for medicine, you could go to ERIC for education, you can go to various other components. You have to know where to go, and you have to have the terminology for you to be able to reasonably find things, given scholarship has, every little scholarship field has its own area. So what Scholar does in this space is to provide you one place, which is what I was referring to earlier, that you can always find everything. That's the discovery part. The second part is at least you know it exists. It may be describing something that is useful to you. Now, the second part, of course, is how do you actually read it? How do you get access to it? And for that, we try to, on a user-by-user basis, we try to find, for articles that you're interested in, a copy that you would be able to read. And that can depend on different components, either a free version of the articles available from the author or from the funding agency or the publisher. If so, that's one approach. Otherwise, your library has licensed this article for you, and you are on campus, or you are able to demonstrate that you are affiliated with the institution, then that's another approach for you to be able to find this. We have been able to, based on this, increase the level of accessible articles an order of magnitude. When we started, it was practically nothing. Today, if you go to Scholar, most of the time, you will see on the right-hand side, so if you have seen Scholar, I can demo this, you get 2 columns of results, unlike most search engines today, which give you 1 column, and that's about it. The first column is your results, and the second one is a version of the article that you have access to. And the coverage of that has dramatically changed over the years. That's effectively what Scholar has made possible.
Thanks, Anurag. Shantanu, Geeta?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think technology, that's one of the biggest potential impact that it can make, is it just dramatically opens up access. And I think of the last few years, when you think about just search, Scholar, the amount of information that's now available to people, it's huge. And Khan Academy, when we were getting started, we recognized there was this one thing that really changed how we can think about education, and that was YouTube. That was just basically the ability to freely deliver lectures online at no cost. 0 cost to us was amazing. And I think that in the last 10 years, I think you've seen a lot of change in the educational space because of that. It really opened up the MOOCs coming out, Coursera, Udacity, organizations like that. And people have really kind of embraced the fact that you can deliver a lot more content online. I think one thing that I found, though, that is challenging about ed tech in the space is that while technology has this amazing potential to level the playing field, everybody can get access to this information. All you need is an internet connection. Initially, it will actually initially widen the achievement gap rather than narrow it. And the reason for that is your early adopters are always the people that have greater means. They're the people with more disposable income. They have access to more technology. They're the people where parents can give these devices to their kids, or schools can afford these devices. So while in the long term you can bring everybody up, in the short term it actually does widen the gap. So I think when you think about access, one thing that I've tried to spend a lot of time thinking about is how do you really target the demographic that you're trying to target? And I think Bolo, like I was mentioning earlier, is a classic example of that, which if you think about how someone learns how to read and you look at that from a US context, you would build a very different product. But if you actually think about what is the needs in rural India, what are the things that they're looking for? They're looking for, first of all, it has to natively be on device, works in Hindi, has to have a small APK size. There's all these specific needs that are critical to that demographic. And if you miss any one of them, you're delaying adoption by years. So I think, when I think about how technology can improve access, I'm very bullish on the long term, because I think in the long term, it'll just, everybody will rise up. But I do think in the near term, you do have to be very deliberate on who you go after, because there are ways that you can actually not constructively help that problem if you do create products that are more targeted to people that already have means, already have higher income, and don't actually create something that everybody can get access to.
Okay. I have something to
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm talking from the point of view of online courses that are available. And while it is true that you have a lot of online content on YouTube and Khan Academy and Coursera, when you start to look at it from the point of view of your own needs, you realize that there is very little you can actually use. For example, there was a time when my daughter was in 8th grade, and she wanted to do an online course on Algebra 2. And middle schools usually don't offer that course. Well, it turned out you can't just go to Khan Academy and do that course, because the school requires that you do a course which is accredited by the University of California system. That's the only way she will get the credit so that she can take the next level course in 9th grade. Now, how do you even find a course like that? So through a lot of hard work, I discovered that there is this one website which lists all the UC accredited courses. And then you find the subset of courses which are online. And then you find a further subset which are self-paced. So now you're left with like 3 different courses to choose from. And how do you pick one? There are no resources to check. There are no reviews for these courses. There's nobody you can ask. Somebody who took the course before, nobody you can ask how the course was. So you just pick one course, and you just hope it'll be good, right? So this whole process is so confusing and so frustrating that most parents will just give up in the first step. They won't even accelerate their kid through these courses at school. And we were actually one of the lucky ones that our school district even allowed us to take an online course. There are a lot of school districts that don't do that. So in high school, most schools allow students to do concurrent enrollment with community colleges so that they can take courses that the school doesn't offer. And I think we need a system where online courses, or at least accredited online courses, are on par with those community college courses. So maybe a state law is required where no matter which school district you go to, no matter which grade you go to, if you take an online course which is accredited by the UC system, then you should get credit for that course. So what I'm actually trying to say is that as a parent, it is not enough that you have online courses. What is important is that your school gives you credit to take that course so that you can accelerate, you can take the next level of course later on.
And one thing I would add there is I think it's a really good point, because we've made a huge gains in access to information, but access to opportunity is a very different thing. And I think in the reality, when you think about what the education system is for, part of it is the information, like actually knowing all these facts and having this knowledge. But a huge part of it, in fact, it's arguably more of it, is actually about the signal to your future employers, or in this case, to the university, like the credential that your school is going to recognize, or the credential that the university is going to recognize and admit you, or the credentials that your employer is going to recognize to actually give you a job. And you can have all the information you want, but if you don't actually have the signal to prove it to others, it's not actually the same thing. And while the internet has opened up information, we do still have a long way to actually opening up the opportunity, and having a better credentialing system would be a huge part of that.
Yeah, so this brings up some interesting topics. So if you look at the problems of equity or equality, or how we want to look at it, there's a few different aspects to that. There is equality in access, or equity in access, equity in opportunity, equity in outcome. And those are all much bigger topics that we're not going to get to today, but that's a whole other set of issues around education and technology as well that are important and need to get looked at. But 2-3 key things that came out of what Geeta was saying was, one was around curation. There is automated curation, what with AI and ML and all of that. More importantly, there's human curation, people curating stuff for others to go look at. I mean, Sal started putting videos online, and all of a sudden, there's millions of people that now learn math that way, and a bunch of other topics. So we want to spend some time talking about the curation aspects and also the corollary to that, which is mentoring and kind of helping students as they're trying to struggle through and learn about things. So the next segment, let's talk about that some more. Leave it to you guys to start.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I do think the curate, as all this information comes online, one of the biggest problems is figuring out what to use, figuring out how to make sense of it. And I think particularly in education, this is a really tough problem because you don't know what you don't know. So when you're going into something, you're saying, oh, I need to learn more about X topic. You don't know what questions to ask about it. You don't have the information to actually evaluate what's going to be good and what's not going to be good. So it's a huge challenge. And I think one of the things that really helped us in the early days of Khan Academy was just that clear consistency, and you knew what you were going to get. You were going to get videos about 10 minutes in length that were going to be of high quality, that were going to go deep on a particular topic, largely with the same, and we'll be able to build a brand around that, largely with the same form factor. And people got value in that, because if you went on the internet, you would get a billion other types of things, and kind of just, it's all over the place. Finding one resource where the experience is a lot more curated was clearly something that people were really kind of hungry for. But I think that's just one step of it. The next part of it, when you think about what a great educational experience is, it's not just having a small set of resources that other people find valuable. It's having the exact resource that you're going to find valuable at that moment in time. And that's a really tough problem. And you see this anytime if you're teaching your kids or whatnot. Like at that moment, what they need is very different from what they needed the day before, or what other kids might need in a very similar circumstance. So being able to pinpoint learning needs at that level is a very difficult problem. I think one thing that we try to do at Khan Academy around this was try to build a model of what the user knows. So one of the earliest things that we did at Khan Academy was build this assessment engine where you can get tested. If you say I want to learn algebra or whatnot, you can get tested on the broad set of information there. And then we can pinpoint, oh, actually, you're a little fuzzy on this factoring polynomials, or you're a little fuzzy on how to complete the square. And once we diagnose that that's actually an issue for you, then you can provide a lot more research. You can give example problems of this is exactly how you do that. You can connect users to the right videos. But that work of assessing where the user is and then finding very high quality content is a really tough problem. And I think while we made some advances in that at Khan Academy, it takes a lot of work, right? I mean, you have to take these big assessments to figure out where you are, whereas a human tutor does that. They just hear the way you talk, and they figure out, oh, you're a little, they do it much, much faster. So I do think it's an interesting area that we're still nowhere close to where we need to get to pick up the signals that are really going to help that user at that time of need.
Geeta?
So I think Khan Academy actually does a fantastic job of curating stuff for school level education. But there are sometimes needs of different kids of things that don't just fall under the umbrella of school level education. So my daughter in middle school comes and says that I want to do programming as my extracurricular. Great. So we looked at some online intro to programming classes. There are a million of those. Picked one, she did one, maybe did another one on game design. Fine. Then what? There was no structured path for her to follow to figure out what the next level of course to take so that she can do more advanced algorithms or write more complicated programs. Well, lucky for her, both her parents are computer science engineers. So we were able to sieve through a million courses online and find the exact right course that she needed to do on AOPS, Art of Problem Solving website, right? Okay, she went through that, we found the next course, and so on, and that has pretty much been a full-time job of ours to just find, satisfy their curiosity and find these right sets of courses for them. Now imagine if my daughter had, I don't know, an English professor for her parents. Or imagine if I had a daughter who wanted to do journalism. We wouldn't even know where to start looking. That problem hasn't been solved, and that's a big void in the curation area for online education.
So for research, and I will leave the K-12 and the college education component because my experience is all limited to research. The challenge or an opportunity both sort of arises from the fact that you built this one service, that you can find everything. But you have not built the people with the knowledge of fields to be able to search them. So, and in research, every field has its own terminology. I was showing Shantanu one of the techniques that we use to help onboard people into a field. So if you're either a student or an expert in area X that is looking for area Y, because it's easy to do, it's available, what can we do to make that a little bit easier? It's not quite curation, but that's as close as we can get. So you should try this on Scholar. Go in there and do a 1-word or 2-word queries of a broad area. We will suggest to you, if you scroll down a little, we'll suggest to you some directions within that broad area that would be worth exploring. The question is, what should you look for? When somebody comes in and asks cancer, what are they doing? They actually don't know enough to be able to read papers. What they need at that point of time is, what do I need to know about cancer to be able to look for things? So that is one of the things that we provide. Here are specific directions within which you can go. You select, and we'll take you deeper and deeper till a point where your terminology indicates that now your query says you are probably an expert. At that point, we start suggesting you things that are related to the idea. So there's a pathway to onboard you in. First question is, do you know the terms? Do you know the questions to ask? And the part of this is to try to help you figure out the questions to ask.
Yeah, 2 parts here that to me sound very interesting. The way technology has been evolving in the last 5 years or so is around the advances in natural language processing and how that has enabled search engines to actually, well, we have 2 people from Google sitting here, so I shouldn't be the one talking about it. But search engines to actually give you much more relevant insights around what you're doing. So, and there's a whole bunch of new research that has come out in the last 12 to 18 months that makes it easier to go and understand the meaning behind what somebody is asking, and then do like entity linking based on stuff in Wikipedia or other places to quickly suggest things to people that are much more relevant than what a typical, say, Google Translate was doing 5 years ago. It's getting a lot more relevant and interesting for an average person to use. So that's one set of interesting technologies out there for those of you that are looking to start companies, that you could use that and build something really interesting in the education space with stuff that is out there in the open source. The other thing an interesting trend that I've been noticing, at least in the time that I'm looking at nonprofits, is nonprofits moving from direct action, where they are working with children directly and making an impact, to training the trainer kind of models to kind of accelerate the pace at which access and discovery gets out there. So Mindful Schools that I was on the board of, when we started Mindful Schools, the goal was to actually go in class into schools in Oakland and Richmond and have mindfulness classes for children in elementary school. And it showed a statistically significant difference in how they performed in school on a lot of metrics. And then 2 years in, the discussion started changing. It was like, okay, how can we get to more kids sooner? So it became about certification programs, about training the trainers, and then building these kind of mentoring and other programs that actually get this out there in a larger scale. So as you're thinking about models out there that work, one of the ways in which you can get it out there faster, sooner, is to look at train the trainer kind of models to actually spread it sooner, which kind of nicely segues into the next segment of what we wanted to talk about as well, which was around innovation. And I think Anurag put it beautifully when we first were talking about this. Where do you know where the boundaries are for you to know how to expand the boundaries? So I'll start with you, Anurag, to kind of talk about the innovation aspects.
Sure. So let me just describe what I mentioned to him. I grew up on campus on Kharagpur. And I saw people spend long hours doing what they thought was important research. There were papers that were published, there were dissertations that were put out. most of it was pointless. Not because they didn't put effort into it, not because they didn't want to make an impact, because where they were looking was not where the frontier of science was. They did not have the information. They were not caught up to the boundary. They were not building a common cathedral of science. They were off in some other place putting together a few bricks because that was what was possible. The challenge is to help everybody who has the willingness and ability to come to the same frontier. If you can do that, there are smart people everywhere who are ambitious, who want to make things happen. If you make this possible, many of them will. So that's, from my point of view, making that possible.
In the online courses space, the place where we need the innovations is a little bit more towards how to give mentoring to people who don't have the parents who can guide them. So take an example of a regular school, right? So when a child goes to a public school or any school, the school provides not only the courses that they are taking, they also provide other services. For example, my daughter is part of this peer tutoring program where during her lunch hour, she teaches math to other students, and she gets volunteer hours for that. And then schools also have these counselors who will guide you in taking the next set of courses for the next school year. Now imagine that a student goes to a public school, but that student is also taking a couple of courses online. Now this student gets stuck on a concept. They don't know they don't understand a particular concept and they need some tutoring. Nobody else in that school has ever taken that course before. So where does this child turn for help? So that's one problem. Or another problem could be like this child is finishing up a course, an online course, and they don't know what next course to take because the school counselors obviously aren't trained on a vast variety of online courses that exist out there on many different platforms. So one way to fix this issue would be if, for example, there was an online platform which would pair up such students with, let's say, student mentors who have maybe gone through some of these courses. And these student mentors who are willing to put in their time for one-on-one tutoring online for these students, or who could maybe guide them on the next set of courses to take on many different platforms. And maybe these mentors could get volunteer hours for their, for the time commitment that they put in here. And this online platform that I'm talking about would have to encompass many different content providers. I mean, we already have a lot of great content providers like Khan Academy or Coursera or many others, right? But we need some kind of a consolidation where the mentor should be able to provide guidance on, okay, if you're taking this course now, what is the next course that you could take on this or some other platform which will further your knowledge in that area? So what I'm actually trying to say is that maybe if we crowdsource this problem of mentoring, and maybe if we provide an incentive for these people who can come and mentor the people who are taking online courses, that would make the model a little bit more sustainable.
Yeah, I think one thing to build off of that, I think learning is really tough. Like really teaching people how to learn is an extremely difficult problem. I mean, we spend tons of money, build schools, a lot of resources, the amount of time people spend from age 5 to 21 going through this process. And when you look at kind of the outcomes that we have and test scores and other things, you often look at that whole process and see how much it's lacking. Now, I think technology can be a huge part of the solution. As we talked about before, it opens up access to a lot more information. But there's a lot of things that it can't do, right? And I think part of it is, it's the mentoring, it's the pinpointing, it's the non-cognitive factors, or a lot of people call them the social emotional skills of teaching people grit, teaching people ambition, teaching people how to, teamwork. So there's all this other stuff that has to happen as a part of learning. And I think if you're an edtech company, if you're thinking about how technology can help in this problem, the best thing to do is really look at where have we made leaps and bounds in technology that has this unique ability to make a difference on some part of that. Nothing's going to solve it completely, and we're years away before you can even hope for anything like that. But there are places where there's all this exciting, innovative work happening. And I think, like I was talking about with Bolo, the core hypothesis there was speech recognition in the last few years is amazingly better than it was 15 years ago. That opens up all kinds of different possibilities. Access to Android phones is amazingly more prevalent now than it was a few years ago. So these are trends that you can look at and say, now I can solve a new problem with that. I do think with AI, with a lot of the areas that technology has been progressing, it is opening up really interesting places, and people are hopeful that we can get great personalized education if we can bring the best of AI to these problems. But we are still, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, and I wouldn't discount how difficult of a problem it is. If you spent all your time trying to teach somebody something, it would still be difficult to actually do that. So, you can only build parts of a solution, and you have to think about how it works with the greater environment that student is in.
Shantanu, could you also talk about Khan Labs and kind of innovating in education itself and what you guys did?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we did at Khan Academy about 4 or 5 years ago was really going to the same point, which is technology is only part of the solution. The humans are the most critical part of this whole equation. And technology is an enabler to different behaviors for the parents, the teachers, the adults in the room. So one thing that we did was, on the ground floor of Khan Academy, start our own lab school. And my kids go there, Sal's kids go there. And it's basically a school where we said, well, if you rethought how schools were built in this day and age, what are some of the assumptions that you would treat differently? So, at the first, kind of some of the core assumptions was the idea that you get out of school at 2 o'clock and you have summers off. Where does that come from? That comes from a world where kids used to need to work the fields, and they had to, harvest the fields in the summer, and they had to do work at manual labor at home. So kids need to be off during these hours of the day. That's not how we operate today. So one of the first things we said, well, actually, it's going to be an extended day. The school's going to operate from 9 to 6 or 8:30 to 6 p.m., and it's going to be extended years. So it's actually going to run through a good bit of the summer. We're going to make summer fun, but it's going to operate through a good bit of the summer. And the other things that we looked at are, how do you move away from this idea of kind of fixed time but variable mastery? So you learn something for a month, and the time runs out, and you move on to the next topic, and you keep kind of progressing through the education system, which we didn't. That's not the way people really learn. I mean, you need to spend as much time as it takes for kids to actually get those concepts. And we really try to orient the school around the idea of fixed mastery. You're going to learn this, but take the time that you need to learn this. Or if you don't need much time, you can move on and do stuff that is going to be enriching for you. So we'd really try to relook at all of those assumptions and think about what school could be in today's day and age.
And this last question, I just wanted quick insights from both Google Scholar side and the Khan Academy side in terms of what are some of the things you learned as you were building these that helped you get to where it is today?
Why don't you start first?
Yeah, I mean, I think
will need to gather my thoughts.
Yeah. So I think, one of the biggest things I've learned is how much people need this, right? I think one of the eye-opening things to me in the early days of Khan Academy, where we had these YouTube channels, and they weren't the highest produced videos. It was literally Sal sitting in his pajamas, writing videos on Microsoft Paint. But the reaction from people was so profound, and people saying, really impressive things about how these videos, I was a C student and now I'm an A student. I really, there's all this pent-up need for this. I think similarly, more recently, with the work that we've been doing in rural India with Bolo, I've just been amazed. We just put an app on the phone of, one family member, and the engagement is through the roof, and people are really looking at this, and we're seeing, tremendous outcomes. We did a randomized control trial, and we saw there was a 60% more kids improve their reading level in 3 months when we just installed the app on their phone. And you see that level of impact is amazing. So one thing that I've kind of learned many times over the years is, we're hungry for this. The world is hungry for this. And we just need to think of better ways to make this possible.
So obviously, this is a very amazing space. We don't have nearly as much interaction because our space is far more homogeneous to that in the research space. But the one thing that we found unexpected was the level to which Scholar gets used by people with medical needs, especially chronic medical needs. People are willing to educate themselves to a level they can actually read papers, follow what is the current research to be figured out what opportunities, what options are there. You get doctors, et cetera, that's normal. You get researchers that you expect, but this large subcommunity, which now uses Scholar, is one of the many large sub-communities within Scholar, I had not expected.
I think we are on time. Can we take one question? Let's take, yes. Okay, let's take one question if anybody has a question. Yes.
I guess my question is, there's been a lot of discussion on K-12 education, but how would this affect graduate or university education? And I mean, maybe how it plays into existing IIT system, right? Are we making use of enough of MOOCs right now? That's a question.
Yeah.
So one of the things I can say is if you look at universities like IIT Madras, and I'm from Madras, so I don't know for the other IITs, a lot of the courses are put online. So you don't have to go to an IIT to kind of listen to some of the good content that the professors teach there. In fact, after spending 200 grand on an MBA, I realized that a lot of the first year courses in my business school are put online for free on Coursera. The same professors, the same course material. So even in the higher education side, there's a lot of, on the access and discovery front, there's a lot happening. Curation is where, of course, some of the university systems help and the mentoring side of things, in addition to the network. But there is a lot of interesting stuff happening on that front as well, startups doing that too.
So I no longer have to give attendance in class.
With that, I would like to thank my panel. Thank you for your time. Thank you all for attending.